Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unmatched. I'm very excited to have a very nice conversation today with Quinn Stainfield-Bruce. He's the CEO and co-founder of Humaness, and I am so excited for you guys to hear all about it. Quinn, welcome to Unmatched.
Thank you so much, Joanne. It's an absolute privilege. I'm very grateful to be here.
So for those of the listeners and the people who are watching today, tell us a little bit about your story and why you do what you do today.
Cool. And like I said, it's a privilege to be here. And I think when I saw on your profile that the future of marketing is human, I knew that we had to connect and meet. And my story, I'll tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly of my story. My story started off...
I love that.
And it started off super, super exciting. I was 18 years old and I was going to go to university and study advertising. I had a place at uni to do that. And on my gap year, the year before, I actually ended up starting my own consultancy, my own youth research company that specialized in insight and strategy. And very quickly, we started working with people like McDonald's and Barclays Bank and MTV. And I just decided to not go to university after those 6 months because, quite frankly, I was already doing it. And we had huge success. We had these really radical ways of doing things, and there was so much passion in what we were doing. We had an agency that was by youth for youth, staffed entirely by young people. And this was when people were kind of afraid of what was going on with young people. And it was when Facebook had just started and YouTube was starting to take off. And so this whole idea that there was this agency of young people was really appealing. And, we did really well. But then life happened to me after about 5 years. I got married at 25. I did everything young, right? I got married at 25. My daughter was born. She ended up being a bit unwell for a couple of years in hospital. She's fine now. But having achieved as much as I achieved at 25, I'd basically done everything that people had told me to do. It was get a good job, make money, be successful, get married, have kids, right? Get the house, get the car, and then you'll be happy. And I did all of this very early, and I wasn't aware of this at the time, but the realization that it didn't make me happy, it was the beginning of quite a significant 10-year down spiral. In summary, I was convinced that if I made more money, I'd be happy. And so I went on this career progression into bigger agencies. I went to work at Omnicom thinking, okay, if I get work in Omnicom or WPP, then I've made it. Did that, wasn't happy. Then I was like, okay, the future's digital, software, if I can get there. So I moved into software for 5 years, closed the biggest deal of my life, and the realization that it didn't make me happy fundamentally brought me to my knees. I actually walked myself into rehab after closing this deal. And after 4 weeks of doing that, came out and quit my job and was like, this hasn't worked for me. The 16 years in marketing, in sales, in software, this hasn't worked. And I thought, okay, I'll be a history teacher. I'm going to go completely the other direction.
That's a big shift.
I was convinced my best attempt at doing everything that everyone told me to do, it had not worked. I was not happy. So I went to university and I did this degree in history. I realized after about 6 weeks that I didn't want to be a teacher. That's not for me. But on the journey that I went on, I realized some of the things that really make you happy, right? I understood what being a human being was really about. I understood about real joy. And when I went back to my business and we started applying processes where you really use these very ancient human ceremonies and practices and processes where you get to really connect with people, it was having such a profound impact on our clients. I knew there was something powerful here. And to this day, I care way more about the clients and the human beings who work on the brands than I necessarily do about the brands and the products, right? My passion is helping the human beings. So there's a lot in that journey, but it's what's led me to where I'm at today.
And I find it fascinating. I resonate with a lot of what you just explained, because I feel that probably we're all going through a very similar journey. I know that I have gone through a similar journey of, yes, fulfilling with my obligations, fulfilling with the path that was, laid in front of me by, family, culture, society at the time. And, there was this thing of, work hard, get the good grades, go to the best schools, get the best jobs, hustle, 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 and go up the ladder, and then you'll be happy. That was my version. In summary, that was my version. And then when I did all that, and when I kind of like crossed all the things that I had initially on my list, a few years ago, then the bigger question for me was, it wasn't that I wasn't happy. It was more like, okay, and now what? What comes next? And then that's where my own personal development journey started, to get to where I am today, with the same realization as you came, the same conclusion that you came to, that actually, figuring out who we are and connecting with ourselves and also with others is probably the most important thing. I want to go back to a little bit, maybe one layer deeper, to what you've told me, because I know you're very open about this. Can you tell me a little bit, what was it that didn't fulfill you completely? As in, out of all those things that were on your to-do list that you were, completing every year, every day, every month, why were you not fulfilled? Why was it not that enough?
It's such a great question. And you're right. The answer is deep, because it stems right back to a core belief that I was unworthy and I was unlovable, right? Now, being the character that I am, being confident and being capable of starting a business when I was 18 and working with CMOs of big companies at a very young age, I could mask that insecurity, right? So everything was in response to the insecurity. If I can achieve that goal, if I can make that salary, if I can win that deal, if I can work with that brand, then I'm good enough, right? Then I'm lovable enough. If I can be successful enough, then the right woman will love me, right? If I can have a family, then I must be lovable, right? Because my personal story was that my mother left when I was 12. She took my sisters and left me. And so I had this sort of deep abandonment wound that, and it's where rejection and abandonment and unlovability all came from. So from a very early age, I didn't realize, but I believed that I was unlovable. So everything was in the pursuit of proving this belief wrong. But obviously, no matter what I achieved, none of that would fix that pain. And so it was this desperate hustle. I love that, you use the word hustle. My whole life was a hustle, that if I can just achieve the next thing, then the pain will go. The truth is, Oana, I didn't even realize I had the pain.
I know. Same. You don't know it while you're in the hustle, because you're so busy hustling. There's literally no time for you to stop and figure out where you are in life.
But eventually, the tools that we use to deal with that pain stop working, right? And when they stop working, that's when you have a gift of desperation. It's like, okay, my best attempt hasn't worked for me, right? So now I'm willing to try something new.
It's interesting. I call that the critical moment of truth. There's this journey, there's this arc, right? And while you're hustling, there's like an upward, cycle. It grows and grows and grows until one certain point in time, there's this critical point, this critical moment of truth, the way that I call it, where everything sort of crumbles because something is happening that shatters all those beliefs that you had, that you had anchored your whole life upon. And then one thing happened that basically breaks it all apart. And then that's where you have to kind of rethink where you are and reconstruct, your life moving forward. How is that for you?
Yeah, I completely agree and understand. And again, it comes back to that statement that my best attempt has not worked, right? Everything I have tried, everything I have achieved has not worked. And therefore, I have to now admit that I do not know what the answer is. And then in that moment of surrender, new things start to present themselves. When I get to say, and it is a relief, when I get to surrender control, right? Because me controlling everything didn't work. So when I get to stop controlling everything, oh my God, you just, it's peaceful.
When you're not trying so hard, right?
Exactly.
Because that's the thing. You're trying so hard that you can't really see what's in front of you.
Exactly. And then what for me happened was I found purpose, right? So if my purpose before was really quite destructive, thinking that if I can make this happen, then I'll be okay, my purpose got reversed and I wanted to help. I wanted to help people the way that I had been helped. And so when that became my purpose, and that was my compass or my North Star, new things start emerging. So I then get to look at my talents. I get to look at my associations. I get to look at my passions and say, okay, well, if my purpose now is fundamentally to help people, how do my talents, my passions, my purpose align to that? And this is where exciting initiatives like Humanness emerged from, all with the purpose of ultimately helping people. But there was so much more that came out underneath it.
Of course. Tell me this: how do you find your purpose? I have to be honest. I've been in search of that purpose for a long, long time. And I've been a fan of Simon Sinek since he wrote the book, about finding your why. And I've done a lot of the exercises that he was, kind of writing in the book. There was this exercise that he was explaining about, calling your best friends, and asking them how you make them feel. And, there's a whole thing. And I've done everything. And I still didn't find my purpose. I eventually did by doing other things, but I'm really curious to know how you unlocked that purpose that you probably already had in you.
We all have it in us, right? And here's the kicker. 9.9 times out of 10, we don't feel worthy of carrying it, right? This is the problem. So even if we can identify it, we don't necessarily feel that we are worthy of carrying that flag, carrying that banner, carrying that purpose. I mean, the first thing to say is there's two levels of purpose. There's inner purpose and outer purpose. Inner purpose is a state of being. It doesn't change, right? It's a constant. It's that North Star that keeps pointing that direction. The outer purpose is the manifestation of the inner purpose, right? So the outer purpose is constantly evolving, constantly changing. Anyone with an entrepreneurial mindset, it's about never staying still. It's about constantly growing. The inner purpose being a state of being it's the way that one uncovers it is by connecting with their assets, right? And what do I mean by their assets? I mean the things that really make them worthy and lovable, right? And I know this is maybe quite psychological where I'm going with this, but it's absolutely key. I used to think what made me worthy and lovable, and I believed this for most of my life, was my bank account, the car I drive, the address I had, the partner I was with, right? Maybe the schools my children went to, the clothes I wore, right? The job title I had, the company I worked for, everything outside of me. That's what made me worthy and lovable. And that was actually the thing that brought me to my knees, right? Because no matter what I did, it didn't work. Our worthiness comes from the infinite things. What makes me worthy? I'm kind. Nobody can take that away from me. I have as much of it as I could ever want. I'm honest. I'm patient. I'm tolerant. I'm loving to the best of my ability. Not all of the time, to the best of my ability. But if that's what makes me worthy, these infinite attributes, well, then my purpose, what brings me real joy, is acting on those things, right? So I suppose part of the secret is that the inner purpose, most people's are actually kind of the same. When I talk to people, when I work with either clients or mentees or friends or family, it's always about being loving, being kind, right? When I wake up in the morning, how can I be kind today, right? Because if I start my day with how can I be kind, chances are it's going to be a good day. Well, it's not going to be a bad one. I'm not going to do anything that's going to be terrible or be shameful or I'm going to regret. So then the inner purpose, this state of being, is always around those assets, right? So mine personally is to love and be loved, to receive love, to give love, right? So if I wake up in the morning and I start with my kids, and the last thing I want to do at 6:30 in the morning is worry about, packed lunches and school runs, but I start my day love and be loved. So they haven't brushed their teeth. They haven't got dressed. We've got to get out the door in 2 minutes. Do I lose my temper or do I go, hold on, right? Be loved. And then I don't have to feel guilty. When I'm negotiating something with a client, can I come from a place of love, which means that this is in everyone's best interest, not something that I can win, right? So the inner purpose is like that. It's a state of being. It's not outside of me. The outer purpose, well, that changes.
Because we change and we evolve and we go through different stages in life and we have different passions and we develop those passions, which are connected to the talents, right? To the skills that you were mentioning before. The question that I have is, because I guess we're all going through life with this sort of masking, right? This sort of mask that we put on, and we sort of benchmark ourselves towards that or towards other people that look successful, and then we think that we need to be like them. I find that to be very, very similar to how companies and brands operate. Essentially, the reason why I say the future of marketing is human is because guess what? Behind companies and brands, there are humans, people like you and me that go through exactly the same journeys and are dealing with the same things. And so thinking about people like us trying to build brands for others, how can we build those brands properly if we don't really understand ourselves? I feel like there's a huge connection in between the two. How have you perceived since, and we're going to get in a second into what humanness is and what you do there, what the work it is that you're doing there, but how do you perceive the business environment from that perspective?
The business, without a doubt, the business environment's in trouble. I call it the corporate pandemic. Gallup did a poll last year. 80% of people want to leave their job. Low engagement costs the global workforce $3.3 trillion a year. Mental health declining. Staff attrition rates declining. Burnout increasing. It's a pandemic. It's a corporate pandemic. So there's real problems here. So that's how I see it manifesting in business. And ultimately, that's going to hit the bottom line. It's going to hit shareholder return. It's going to hit growth targets. It's a bad state of affairs. But going back to what you were asking, honesty. The masks that we wear because we're afraid that if we show people who we really are, we're going to get rejected, right? If we show people who we really are, that they're not going to like us. So what we do is we put a mask on of what we think society, our employers, our colleagues, our friends, our relationships, what they want to see. The problem is Putting a mask on is just a euphemism for being dishonest. It's a lie. People pleasing is just dishonesty. It's lying. With all of the best intentions, but the problem is that if we're going into relationships and we're going into work, lying, we don't stand too much of a chance in the long run. Because what it means is that people don't feel safe, right? If people don't feel safe to express themselves, then how are they going to feel safe to innovate? How are they going to feel safe to take a risk? How are they going to feel safe to do the right thing, for a brand's purpose or its mission or its values, to act on them with integrity? But if nobody feels safe because they can't be honest, then how does that happen? So imagine, Oana, for a second, you're working on a new innovation pipeline for an accessories range. And you are walking home and you are thinking of these ideas and they're coming to you. You're in a creative flow. And then a saber-toothed tiger jumps out in front of you, right? And starts roaring. But in that moment, are you going to be thinking about that innovation and what would happen if you added this facet here and this thing here and stay in that creative flow? Or are you going to go into panic, right? And will all of that creativity...
I'm going to run.
You are going to run.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to run.
but this metaphor is how people are at work, right? Because if you don't feel safe, it means that there's an element of fear. And if you're in fear, you're not in creativity, right? You are in reaction. You're in, what do I do to survive? Right? And so this is this big byproduct of the dehumanization of work. And by dehumanization, I mean not being able to be honest, not being able to be vulnerable, not being able to trust, not being able to be creative. It creates a system of reaction, not a system of creation. If that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And I feel like we need more creation in the world. I don't know if you would agree, but I feel that in the last maybe 5 years or so, I feel there's this spiral of repetition, not of real creation. There's nothing really new happening. I don't know, if you look in every industry, if you look in music, if you look in entertainment, in movies, if you look at products at large, yes, there's exciting brands out there, there's amazing products everywhere, but like, is there something really new and exciting that is happening? That it's, like I always refer to the 80s. The 80s were such an era of creation. You could see so much going on in culture, in music, and in fashion, everywhere. It feels like we're stuck in like reinventing things from the past, bringing things from the past and trying to add something new to them that is kind of not cool enough.
I think we both know that this is absolutely true, right? There's a few heroes of mine in the advertising world, right? One of them is Sir Martin Sorrell. The other one is Sir John Hegarty. And the other is Rashad Tabakawala, who was the chief digital officer and publicist. He wrote a book called Restoring the Soul of Business. I've been lucky enough over the last year to meet with all of them and to discuss various things. Let's look at Sir Martin Sorrell, right? So he launched S4, which the main agency is Media Monks. Media Monks, part of their modus operandi is faster, cheaper, better, right? So that's, this is Sir Martin, who I adore and look up to and admire, godfather of the industry, the biggest agency in that portfolio. And he knows what he's doing, right? Quicker, faster, cheaper, better, right? Then you have Sir John, the man behind some of those great 80s ads that you're probably talking about, Audi and Levi's, etc. I mean, one of the most creative guys ever. He has spent the last year launching a course to teach people creativity. So he sees such a need for creativity to be restored that he's created an entire course and workshop and operation to teach people to be creative. And then you have Rishad, right? And Rishad, who is the chief digital officer, I hope I got that right, but is definitely the head of digital at Publicis Group, who writes a book called Restoring the Soul of Business. So these archetypes of the industry, right, are pointing directly at the fact that what you're saying is true.
So what's the solution? And now I would love for you to go into what humanness is and what is that solution that you're bringing to the business world, to leadership, to people behind brands and businesses, to sort of address in some way this pandemic, as you call it, that we're going through.
Well, I know Rishad won't mind me saying this, right? But I stole a little bit from his title, Restoring the Soul of Business. What's needed is to restore human qualities to business. What are human qualities? We touched on them before. Kindness, love, purpose, honesty, passion, creativity, right? These things have lost their way. Why have they lost their way? They've lost their way because if you imagine a farmer who is overplanting his field, eventually he will suck all of the nutrients out of the topsoil. Decades and decades ago, a decision was made in business that you take a product that is good and you make it as profitable and as efficient as you possibly can, and you squeeze and you squeeze and you squeeze. And that has been going on for decades and decades, just like the topsoil, the nutrients being sucked out. Where that impact happens is on the human beings. Oh, Anna, I know you are creative, right? I know that when I got into marketing, right, it wasn't because I wanted to increase a distribution by 2% or solve a supply chain problem. It looked creative. I didn't really know what creative was when I was a teenager necessarily, but I knew that felt exciting and fun. But how often when what you're doing is driving efficiencies and profitability, how creative do you get to be, right? Because that's all the software revolution is. Streamlined, faster, quicker, better, right? Get it out to more, quicker, faster, cheaper. Creativity. If you can restore creativity to the workplace, and I don't just mean in marketing, I mean in HR, in sales, in packaging, across the board. At some point in our history of our industry, creative was taken by the agencies and it was given to certain people in the agencies, and they were told that they are the creatives and you're not, right? Now, I despise this, right? Every human being is creative. Every single one. Right down to when we were cave people, and if we came out of our cave and the crops were gone or the food was gone, we had to think of a solution or we died. That is creativity. We all have it. What we don't have is an environment that allows for creativity to unfold. And again, creativity has to come from a place of vulnerability, a place of bravery. If you're sat in a meeting and you're too afraid to come up with a new, different way of doing things because you don't want to get in trouble or shunned or rejected or laughed at, you're not going to say it, right? But if there's an environment of honesty, an environment of trust, where the leadership are vulnerable, the leadership expose their fears and their insecurities. So then people down the chain feel that this is an okay thing to do. Then creativity can be allowed to emerge again, and when you have that type of dynamic going on, people feel excited again. They feel passionate. Their purpose, because they've been honest, can reveal itself. And then they can look at the corporate purpose and go, I feel where I connect with that. I'm turning up to work and my business is aligned to me. It changes everything.
So how do we do that, Quinn? How do you do it in humanness? What is the process there?
So very practically speaking, it's two things. One is about engaging the right hemisphere of our brain. So Dr. Ian McGill-Christ and John Evans on his podcast I think CMO Uncensored had a great conversation around this. We use our left brain. We use the analytical side. Business today is very left focused. It's about solving problems, dealing with the analytics, dealing with reactionary stuff. Our right brains is where our creativity comes from. It's where our feminine energy comes from. It's where our passion for storytelling and art and theatre come from. But we have shut off access to a lot of that in business. So the first thing we have to do is access that. The second thing we have to do is create an environment where it can be accessed. The way that we do this is using ancient human techniques. We use art, we use ceremony, we use shamanic medicine walks, we use tribal drumming, we use cow ceremonies, we use sound immersion experiences. We aggressively force everyone in the environment into a place of right brain thinking. The science behind this, and there's a lot of it out there, is that we move people from a state of beta brainwave, right? Beta brainwave is where we are in high stress, our cortisol levels are high, it creates fear and a high heart rate, and we force people to an alpha brainwave state, right? This is where creativity flows. So whether people find it comfortable or not, when you're sat with a group of people tribal drumming or in a sound immersion experience or in a cacao ceremony, whether you like it or not, it's shifted you. And what happens, though, Awana, on this, and we don't go for this, but it's what happens, and we've been doing this for a while now, is that there are emotional releases. People cry and connect with things that they had never connected with before. They connect with the brand that they work on. They connect with why it's important to them. They connect with themselves. And when you have everyone from the CMO to brand managers all doing this together, trust me, those walls of fragile masks get broken down pretty quick, But what people find is it's quite a life-changing process.
I can imagine that. And I will ask you again the question that I asked you last time when you told me this. I can't imagine, a group of CEOs, CMOs, and like all those like top leadership people around like a fire or something, doing some kind of, ancient tribal exercises. I just cannot picture that. How do you convince them to go there, to do that, to become so vulnerable and expose themselves to that degree in front of, their peers and, people that are, beneath them in terms of hierarchy? How do you do that?
Well, word of mouth has been a big thing for us because ever since, 2004, when I started the Youth Conspiracy, we have been using radical processes. And so the clients that we've been working with for decades, will testify to it. So that's an important part. Second of all, is that when people are in enough pain, and we touched on this ourselves, when I was in enough pain, I was willing to try anything to change it, right? So often the times we start working with brands is when there's a brand that's maybe in trouble. And at this point, people are willing to try new things to change it. But I think we're in a process of awakening. Some of the things that, I talked about, I'm sure you've done a lot of them, right? People, whereas maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they were very odd, very odd to say we're going to do tribal drumming and then start talking about brand strategy. Today, a lot of the times people are going, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is exciting. The thing is, like with any new thing, until you've experienced it, you can't really possibly know the impact it's going to have. But that's why unknown is so interesting, right? I wouldn't want to know how my outer purpose is going to play out every day. If I did, it would be boring. Right? I want to know that there's going to be mystery and new things and new experiences. And that's what people get from the experience and why I think it has this lasting impact.
And that's what's keeping us on our toes, right? This is what makes life interesting in the end of the day, not knowing, and this constant discovery and exploration. What has been the biggest outcome or the biggest transformation that you've witnessed, having performed these processes over and over again for the last years with different companies and different brands?
From a business standpoint, and I'm not going to dwell on this because it's not what drives me, right? We have seen brands that have been in real trouble suddenly grow by tens and even hundreds of millions over a couple of years because of the impact that it's had on everything, from repositioning it from this place, it being a brand that nobody really wanted to work on, to then everybody wanting to work on, right? It just changed everything. But for me, that's not why I do this, right? The biggest thing is when you see someone who turns around after this process or as a part of the process and goes, I finally have purpose. I finally have deep passion for what I'm doing. I won't name any names, but one major multinational FMCG company, the global vice president said at the end of the event, I was going to hand in my notice tomorrow. Right? That's where I was at. And now I'm not. Now I believe in what we're doing. Now, can you imagine the cascading effect on that person who was going to leave and now wants to stay, but also has the vulnerability and bravery to tell everyone that that's where they were at. That, whatever that is what I care about. That impact on the human being, and we see it all the time, where people suddenly can connect with what they do.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the only solution to whatever we're dealing with right now, whatever this global pandemic is across the different industries, across different verticals of the business, I care about marketing and branding specifically because that's my field and that's what I'm passionate about. And I see it quite a lot in our field, is I think it all starts with the person. That's why I talk about the future of marketing is human, because behind the brands, there's people. In front of the brands, there's people, the consumers. On our right, on our left, there's people, partners, different stakeholders that we collaborate with, on a daily basis. We're all human. And we tend to dehumanize all these different stakeholders, and we even call them stakeholders instead of calling them, okay, these people, just like us, they're people. And we kind of forgot what the core of those people is, which is being human, right? And I think that the potential solution for this is to go back to remembering that being human means something. It comes with certain values. It makes us different than machines. And especially with the whole conversation on AI and technology coming upon us, to be human, to be creative, I think it's even more important than maybe it was 2 years ago. And I think it's going to become even more important in the future.
I absolutely agree with you, of course. And you look at, let's look at marketing and advertising, for example. How many brands now are bringing creative strategy and planning in-house, right? Taking it from the agency world. There are these ripples that are happening, right? That are showing this need. When it comes to consumer insight, for years, we've been told we've never had it so good. Look how much data you've got. Look how quickly you can get response. Look at the social listening. Look at the trends. Look at the forecasts. But insight has always been about an actionable opportunity, a story to tell, a narration, a feeling. It's not data. Data's great, right? But if you don't have the human element in it, who cares, right? And we see, unfortunately, I've seen this a lot with CMI teams and clients of ours globally, where it's almost like the soul of insight and research has been slowly eroded whilst being told you've never had it so good, right? But again, this point of waking up, people like yourself, Oana, right, who are like, okay, hold on, something's not right here. Something's not working. And people are now responding to that and going, do you know what? We're going to be brave. We're going to resist against the efficiencies of all of this data. We're going to resist against the efficiencies and profitability of automated ad spend and AI-based ad spend and targeting, and dare I say it, AI-based creative, right? Hold on, because if we don't have soul, this doesn't matter to us, it doesn't matter to the consumer, and it's ultimately going to really hit the brand, and it's going to then hit the corporation. So we're going to have, someone has to hit the brakes, right? Or at least inject.
Yeah, and also, I mean, someone has to stop and think. I think technology is fantastic, by the way. I'm not against it, and I don't want to kind of fight it because I think it's impossible to fight it, and also it's quite exciting in many ways. But the question that I always ask, because I think it's always about asking the right questions, right? It's not about trying to find solutions, about what right questions are you asking. And for me, the right question is, how do you use this technology? Is it okay to be used for everything, or should we prioritize, for example, certain kind of efficiencies and then, that to kind of like become leaner or whatever, and improve efficiency, but then being able with that to invest more in creativity, giving that the opportunity to invest more in creativity. I think there's areas where you can automatize a lot, and that's fine. Then there's areas like in marketing that if you start automatizing and taking the soul out of the messaging, then I think it's, the receiving end of it, they're still human. We're not selling to machines, we're not selling to AI yet. So while we're selling to people, to real people, we should still have, our human hats on and think like real people.
And I think what you said about the right question is absolutely key. Well, who's asking the question? Is it a human question, right? And so imagine for a minute that if you and your team had gone through processes where you had connected with each other, where you could express honestly, vulnerably, etc. And then you asked yourself the question, okay, well, how are we going to use AI? I think the answer would have integrity, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
without the humanity first, what you put in is going to be flawed. And if you rely totally on the technology, then it's really flawed.
I agree. Quinn, it's been such a pleasure speaking to you. It's so amazing to see that there's so much, kindness and humanity out in the world, and you can spot it, in different parts of the world. And this has been the beauty of my own journey of discovering that within myself and finding other like-minded people that think and feel the same and are trying to actually do something in that direction. And I think, as you said, it does take bravery. It's not easy, to kind of like stand out a little bit and be a little bit the black sheep or be a little different than the others. But I guess down the line, when you are drawing the line and it's kind of getting to the end of it, when you look back, because that's when we connect the dots, right? Looking backwards, not looking forwards, I guess, and I'm hoping that that's when it's all going to worth it. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's been such a pleasure. So much love, Oana. Thank you.